Kim Tae wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked late in his tiny repair shop. The old building creaked in the sole wind, and streetlights flickered through dirty windows. He had 3 motorcycles to fix before morning, and his hands were already sore from hammering dented metal back into shape. The radio played soft music in the corner, keeping him company in the empty neighborhood. He picked up his hammer again and struck the bent exhaust pipe. The sound echoed through the shop like always. But then something strange happened. The second time he hit the metal, there was no sound at all. Everything went completely quiet. Even the radio stopped. Kim Tae looked up, confused. The street lights outside weren't flickering anymore. They weren't even there. Instead, a bright white light filled everything. Not just bright like a flashlight, but white like being inside a star. He couldn't see his hands, couldn't see the motorcycle, couldn't see anything except endless white light. He tried to call out, but no sound came from his mouth. He tried to move, but his body felt like it was floating in thick water. The light got brighter and brighter until it hurt to keep his eyes open. Then everything went black. When Kim Tae woke up, he was lying on something cold and smooth. His head felt heavy, like he had been sleeping for days. He sat up slowly and looked around. The room was silver from floor to ceiling, with no windows or doors that he could see. Strange symbols glowed softly on the walls, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Hello?" he called out. His voice sounded small in the big room. "Kim Tae?" a voice answered. He turned and saw a man about his age sitting against the far wall. "My name is Park Jin. I teach at the elementary school in Busan." Kim Tae stood up on shaky legs. "Where are we? What happened?" "I don't know," Park Jin said. "1 minute I was grading papers in my classroom, and then there was this light. When I woke up, I was here." A soft voice came from another corner. "Same thing happened to me." A young woman walked toward them. She wore a nurse's uniform that was now wrinkled and dirty. "I'm Lee So. I was working the night shift at the hospital when everything went white." The last person in the room was barely more than a teenager. He sat with his knees pulled up to his chest, looking scared. "Choi Han," he said quietly. "I was studying for my college entrance exam in the library." Kim Tae looked at each of them. "So we were all doing normal things, and then we ended up here. But where is here?" Before anyone could answer, part of the silver wall became see-through like glass. On the other side, tall figures moved in the shadows. They were shaped like people, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, with skin so pale it looked almost white. Their eyes glowed with a soft blue light that never blinked. The creatures moved closer to the glass and stared at the humans inside. They tilted their heads left and right, like birds watching insects. They whispered to each other in sounds that were almost like singing, but the words made no sense. "They're watching us," Lee So whispered. One of the tall beings pointed directly at Kim Tae, then at Park Jin, then at each human in turn. The others gathered around, nodding and making more musical sounds. They looked excited, the way people get when they find something interesting at a market. Kim Tae felt his stomach turn cold. Whatever these things were, wherever this place was, he knew they were in serious trouble. The silver wall suddenly became solid again, hiding the strange beings from view. Kim Tae and the others stood in silence, hearts beating fast. The quiet felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Then new sounds came from beyond the walls, footsteps that didn't sound quite human. "Something's coming," Choi Han whispered, pressing himself against the far wall. The footsteps got louder and slower, like someone very important was taking their time. Kim Tae felt his hands shake. He clenched them into fists, trying to stay calm. As a mechanic, he was used to fixing problems, but this was nothing like a broken engine. A section of the wall slid open without any sound. Cool air flowed into the room, carrying a smell like flowers mixed with metal. The 4 humans moved closer together, watching the doorway. First came 2 of the tall, pale beings they had seen before. These ones wore tight-fitting suits that seemed to glow from the inside. They moved with perfect steps like dancers, and their blue eyes never looked away from the humans. They were clearly guards of some kind. Then she entered. Kim Tae had never seen anything like her. She was much taller than the guards, maybe 7 feet high, and moved like she was floating instead of walking. Her skin looked like moonlight on Water, pale and smooth and somehow glowing. Long silver hair flowed down her back like liquid metal. She wore robes that changed color as she moved. Sometimes they were deep blue like the night sky, sometimes purple like sunset clouds. The fabric seemed alive, shifting and flowing around her tall frame. On her head sat a thin crown made of the same glowing metal as the walls. The other aliens in the room immediately stepped back and lowered their heads. Even the guards showed respect. This was clearly someone very important, maybe their queen or princess. She walked slowly around the room, studying each human like they were paintings in a museum. Her eyes were different from the others, not just blue but filled with intelligence and curiosity. When she looked at Park Jin, he shrank back. When she studied Lee So, the young nurse tried to hide behind Kim Tae. She spent a long time looking at Choi Han, tilting her head and making soft sounds. The teenager was shaking so badly he could barely stand. Then she moved on. Finally, she stopped in front of Kim Tae. She was so tall he had to look up to meet her eyes. Up close, he could see that her skin had tiny patterns like scales, and her fingers were longer than human fingers should be. She smelled like cold air and something sweet he couldn't name. She stared at him for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Kim Tae forced himself to stare back, even though every part of his body wanted to run away. His father had always told him never to show fear, even when he was scared. The princess, because that's what she had to be, smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had found exactly what they were looking for. She raised one long finger and pointed directly at Kim Tae's chest. When she spoke, her voice was like music, but the words made his blood run cold. "I want him," she said in perfect Korean. The other aliens gasped and stepped back even further. Even the guards looked surprised. Kim Tae felt his heart stop for a moment, then start beating so fast he thought it might explode. The princess nodded to her guards and they began moving toward him. The guards grabbed Kim Tae's arms before he could react. Their hands felt cold, even through his clothes, and they were much stronger than they looked. He tried to pull away, but it was like fighting against metal bars. "Wait!" Park Jin shouted. "Leave him alone!" The princess raised her hand, and Park Jin's voice cut off, mid-sentence. Not because he stopped talking, but because no sound came out of his mouth anymore. His lips moved, but the air was completely silent around him. The message was clear: don't interfere. Kim Tae was dragged through hallways that seemed to go on forever. The walls were the same silver metal, but now they had windows. Through them he could see stars, more stars than he had ever seen from Earth. They weren't just dots of light, but swirling clouds of color that moved like living things. He realized with a sick feeling that he was very far from home. They stopped at another door that slid open silently. The guards pushed him inside, and the door closed behind him with a soft click. Kim Tae was alone. But what a prison it was. The room was 3 times bigger than his entire apartment back in Seoul. The floor felt warm under his feet, made of some smooth stone that seemed to glow from within. There was a bed that looked like it was carved from a single piece of white wood, covered with blankets, softer than anything he had ever touched. One wall was completely transparent, showing the star-filled space outside. A small kitchen area had strange devices that he guessed were for cooking, though nothing looked familiar. The bathroom had a shower that sprayed water from the ceiling like warm rain. It was beautiful, it was comfortable, and it was definitely a prison. Kim Tae tried the door, but there was no handle, no button, nothing. He pushed against the walls, looking for weak spots or hidden panels. Nothing. He was trapped in the most comfortable cage he had ever seen. The next morning, though he couldn't tell if it was really morning in space, the door opened. Princess Velnara entered, but now she was alone. She moved to a chair that seemed to grow out of the floor as she approached it. "Good morning, Kim Tae," she said, her voice still musical but somehow warmer than before. He stayed standing, arms crossed. "Let me go back to my friends. Your friends are safe and comfortable just as you are." She gestured around the room. "Do you like your new home?" "It's not my home. My home is Earth, in a small repair shop that probably has mice and leaks when it rains. I want to go back there." She tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle. Fascinating. You prefer discomfort to beauty. Tell me, what do you feel when you wake up in the morning? What kind of question is that? A simple one. In my world, we wake up knowing exactly what the day will bring. Every meal is perfectly balanced. Every task is optimally assigned. Every conversation follows predictable patterns. But humans, you wake up not knowing if you'll be happy or sad, successful or frustrated. How do you function with such chaos? Kim Tae stared at her. You think not knowing what's going to happen is weird? We have eliminated uncertainty from our lives. No one goes hungry. No one feels lost. No one makes mistakes. We have achieved perfection. She leaned forward, eyes bright with curiosity. Yet you seem more alive than us. Why? Over the following days, Velnara visited him regularly. She watched him eat, taking notes when he chose spicy food over bland food, or when he ate too much and felt sick afterward. She observed him sleep, recording how he tossed and turned instead of lying still. She brought him broken objects, devices that looked like they had never been designed to break. Fix this, she would say, then watch in amazement as he used his hands to bend metal or twist wires in ways that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Your people are fascinatingly broken, she told him one day. Your emotions make you unpredictable. Your bodies are weak and inefficient. Your minds jump from thought to thought like what? Like nothing in our civilization. We have order, Kim Tae. Beautiful, perfect order. But you have something we lost long ago. What's that? She smiled, that unsettling smile again. Chaos. Beautiful, creative chaos, and I want to understand it. Kim Tae felt a chill run down his spine. He was beginning to understand that he wasn't just a prisoner. He was a specimen, and that was much more dangerous. Kim Tae had been in his luxurious prison for 2 weeks when he started to notice something strange about his captors. It began with small things that didn't make sense at first. Every morning, a panel in the wall would slide open and produce his breakfast. The food was always perfectly prepared, not too hot, not too cold, with exactly the right amount of nutrients his body needed. But one morning the panel opened and nothing came out. It just sat there, empty and silent. Kim Tae waited, thinking maybe it was delayed. An hour passed, then 2 hours. His stomach started growling, but still nothing happened. He pressed his face to the transparent wall and saw something interesting. 2 of the tall aliens stood in the hallway outside, staring at the broken food panel. They weren't doing anything, just standing there, looking confused. One of them kept touching a device on his wrist, making the same gestures over and over. The other one was speaking into a small crystal, but Kim Tae could tell from his body language that he was frustrated. "Hey," Kim Tae called out, banging on the wall, "the food thing is broken." The aliens looked at him through the transparent barrier, then at each other, then back at their devices. They seemed to be waiting for something, but Kim Tae couldn't. Figure out what? Hours passed. Kim Tae got hungrier and more curious. He started examining the food panel more closely. It was built into the wall, but there were tiny gaps around the edges where he could see inside. Using his fingernails, he managed to pry off a small cover plate. Inside, he found something that made him smile. The technology looked incredibly advanced from the outside, but the actual mechanics were simple. A small tube had come loose from its connection, and a tiny motor had stopped spinning because some kind of gel had dried up around it. Kim Tae had fixed 1,000 similar problems in his repair shop. Different machines, same basic issue. He took off his shoelace and used the plastic tip to push the tube back into place. Then he spit on his finger and worked the moisture into the dried gel until the motor could turn freely again. The panel hummed to life and produced a perfect breakfast. The 2 aliens in the hallway stared at him like he had just performed magic. One of them dropped his crystal device, and it clattered on the floor. They both started talking very fast in their musical language, pointing at Kim Tae and then at the food panel. Within minutes, Princess Velnara arrived with a group of other aliens. They crowded around the hallway, all staring at the now working food panel and whispering to each other. "How did you do that?" Velnara asked when she entered his room. "Do what? Fix a loose connection and add some lubricant? It's basic maintenance." "But you had no tools, no replacement parts, no technical specifications." Kim Tae shrugged. "I didn't need them. I could see what was wrong and figured out how to fix it with what I had. Velnara's eyes went wide. You improvised, I guess. Is that weird? For us, yes. When something breaks, we wait for the repair protocol to be transmitted from our central maintenance system. Then we follow the exact steps with the exact tools in the exact order. What if the repair protocol doesn't come? Then we wait until it does. Kim Tae stared at her. You just wait? Even if the fix is simple? Simple. She laughed, but it sounded strange, like she was trying to remember how laughter worked. There is nothing simple about what you did. You analyzed an unknown system, identified the problem, and created a solution using materials that were never designed for that purpose. That kind of thinking was eliminated from our species thousands of years ago. Why would you eliminate problem solving? Because it led to chaos, unpredictable results, inefficiency. She paused, studying his face. But also creativity, innovation, growth, things we can no longer achieve. Kim Tae was beginning to understand something important. These aliens weren't just technologically advanced, they were trapped by their own perfection. They had built themselves into a corner where they could only do things one way, the right way. But sometimes the wrong way worked better, and that realization was going to be very useful. After Kim Tae fixed the food dispenser, everything changed. Princess Velnara didn't just visit him once a day anymore. She came 3 or 4 times, sometimes staying, for hours. She brought other aliens with her, scientists and researchers who took notes on everything he did. At first, Kim Tae thought it was just curiosity, but then he noticed the small devices hidden around his room, tiny cameras no bigger than coins, tucked into corners and behind decorations. They followed his every movement with soft, whirring sounds. "You're watching me all the time now," he said during one of her visits. "Of course," Velnara replied, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your behavior patterns are fascinating. Did you know that you pace exactly 47 steps when you're thinking about something difficult? And when you're frustrated, your heart rate increases by 32%. Kim Tae felt his skin crawl. "You're counting my steps?" "We're analyzing everything. Your sleep cycles, your eating habits, the way you solve problems. Yesterday you spent 6 minutes staring at the stars before breakfast. What were you thinking about?" That's private. Privacy is inefficient. We record and study all behaviors to understand them better." She gestured to one of the scientists who held up a glowing tablet. "Would you like to see your emotional response patterns from the past week?" No, I would not like to see that. But she showed him anyway. The screen displayed wavy lines and colorful charts that apparently represented his feelings. Red spikes when he got angry, blue valleys when he felt sad, green clusters when he was trying to figure something out. "Remarkable," Velnara murmured. "Your emotional state changes dozens of times per day, sometimes minute by minute. In our society, an individual might experience 3 or 4 different emotions in an entire year. That sounds boring. That sounds stable, predictable, efficient." She leaned closer. "But you're like a storm system, chaotic and powerful and completely unpredictable." The next day, she brought him a pile of broken machines, not just 1 or 2, but dozens of different devices. Some looked like communication equipment. Others might have been tools or weapons. All of them were damaged in different ways. "Fix them," she commanded. "What if I don't want to?" "Then I'll reduce the food rations for your friends." Kim Tae felt anger spike through him, the kind that probably showed up as a big red mark on her charts. But he had no choice. He started working on the machines. What disturbed him most was how she watched. She didn't just observe from across the room. She stood right behind him, so close he could feel her cold breath on his neck. She recorded everything, how he held the tools, which problems he tackled first, even the faces he made when something didn't work right. "Why do you start with the easiest repairs?" she asked. "To build confidence before tackling the hard stuff." Inefficient. Logic dictates starting with the most critical repairs first. Logic doesn't account for getting frustrated and giving up. She made more notes. Everything he said, everything he did, all of it went into her research. One day, while she was distracted by her tablet, Kim Tae noticed something that made his blood run cold. The device she was using had a file directory visible on the screen. Most of the folders had names in the alien language, but some were in English. Human subject, 847, Kim Tae. Human subject, 846, complete breakdown. Month 3, human subject 845, psychological collapse. Month 2, human subject 844, mental failure. Month 4. The list went on and on, dozens of files. Dozens of humans who had been in his exact situation. Kim Tae's hands started shaking. How many people have you done this to? Velnara looked up from her tablet. Done what? This. The watching, the testing, the... He pointed at her screen. I can see the files. Human subjects. How many people have sat in this room before me? For the first time since he'd met her, Velnara looked uncomfortable. She quickly closed the file directory, but it was too late. Research requires multiple subjects to ensure accurate data, she said carefully. What happened to them? They completed their contribution to our understanding. That's not an answer. What happened to them? Velnara was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. Humans are fragile, the mind especially. When subjected to intensive study, most individuals experience what you would call a breakdown. They stop eating, stop sleeping, stop responding to stimuli. Kim Tae felt sick. You drove them insane. We gathered valuable data about human psychological limits. And then what? What happened to them after they broke? Velnara didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Kim Tae could see it in her eyes. He was subject number 847. And if he didn't find a way out soon, he was going to end up like all the others. Knowing he was just another test subject changed everything for Kim Tae. The comfortable prison felt like a tomb now, and every camera watching him felt like a countdown to his own breakdown. But instead of giving up, something harder and angrier grew inside his chest. If they wanted to study chaos, he would give them more chaos than they could handle. Kim Tae started small. Instead of fixing the broken machines the way they expected, he began fixing them wrong on purpose. Not so wrong that they wouldn't work, but wrong in ways that would confuse the aliens watching him. He took apart a communication device and put it back together with the components in different places. It still worked, but now it worked better than before. The aliens spent hours trying to understand how moving the power source to the bottom instead of the top had actually improved efficiency. He started eating his meals in random order. Dessert first, then soup, then the main course. When they asked why, he said he felt like it. The concept of doing something just because you felt like it sent the researchers into confused discussions that lasted for days. But his real plan was bigger than just confusing them. During one of his repair sessions, Kim Tae managed to access the ship's internal communication system. The aliens were so focused on watching him work that they didn't notice him connecting a small device to their network. Late that night, when the cameras were in their lowest surveillance mode, Kim Tae sent a message to his friends. The message was simple. Act crazy. Be unpredictable. Break their patterns. Park Jin was the first to understand. The next morning, instead of sitting quietly in his cell like always, he started exercising. Not normal exercising. He did jumping jacks for exactly 17 minutes. Then push-ups for 12 minutes, then sat completely still for 31 minutes. Then he repeated the cycle. The aliens monitoring him went into panic mode. Their behavioral prediction models couldn't handle the random timing. They brought in more scientists to figure out what Park Jin was trying to accomplish. Lee So began talking to herself, but not in Korean. She made up a completely fake language, speaking it with perfect confidence as if it made total sense. When the aliens tried to translate it, they found nothing but nonsense, which drove them crazy because their computers said she was following grammatical rules that didn't exist. Choi Han started the most brilliant rebellion of all. He began solving math problems, but he solved them using methods that were technically correct, but completely backwards from how any rational person would approach them. The aliens spent days trying to understand his innovative mathematical approach, when really he was just being deliberately inefficient. The ship's behavioral analysis systems started overloading. Alarms went off in the research sections. Scientists held emergency meetings trying to figure out why all their human subjects had suddenly become impossible to predict. That's when Velnara came to Kim Tae's cell, and she was not happy. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "I don't know what you mean. Your friends, their behavior patterns have become completely erratic. Our models can't process their actions anymore." Kim Tae shrugged. "Maybe humans are just more complicated than you thought. This isn't natural variation, this is coordinated. You're communicating with them somehow, disprove it." Velnara's eyes flashed with anger, the first real emotion Kim Tae had ever seen from her. "If you don't return their behavior to normal patterns, I will reduce their food rations." "Go ahead. I will remove their exercise privileges." "Okay. I will..." She paused, thinking of something that would definitely get his attention. "I will separate Park Jin from the others and place him in solitary confinement." Kim Tae felt his heart skip, but he kept his face neutral. "That's your choice." Velnara leaned closer. "He's important to you, the teacher. I can see it in your stress responses whenever his name is mentioned. If you don't cooperate, I will make sure he suffers." Something inside Kim Tae snapped. "You want to see unpredictable behavior?" he shouted, jumping to his feet so fast that Velnara stumbled backward. "You want to study human emotions? Here's one for your research." He grabbed the nearest broken machine and threw it against the wall. The crash echoed through the room like thunder. Then he picked up another device and smashed it on the floor. "Stop!" Velnara commanded, but Kim Tae wasn't listening. Years of frustration poured out of him. Frustration at being trapped, at being watched, at being treated like an animal in a cage. He destroyed everything he could reach, screaming in Korean and English and just wordless rage. Velnara pressed herself against the far wall, staring at him with wide eyes. Not the calculating stare of a scientist studying a subject, but the terrified look of someone seeing something they had never imagined possible. When Kim Tae finally stopped, breathing hard and surrounded by broken machinery, the room was completely silent. "Fascinating," Velnara whispered, and that's when Kim Tae realized something important. She wasn't afraid of his anger. She was fascinated by it, because in her perfect, emotionless world, real rage was something her people had forgotten how to feel. His breakdown wasn't a failure, it was a weapon. After his explosive outburst, Kim Tae noticed something that changed everything. The aliens who came to clean up the broken machines weren't the usual researchers. They were lower-ranking crew members, and they kept glancing nervously at the mess he had made. More importantly, they kept whispering to each other when they thought he wasn't listening. Kim Tae had picked up enough of their musical language over the weeks to understand basic words. What he heard made him smile for the first time in days. "Dangerous," one of them said. "Protocol violation," said another. "Princess risks mission." That night, Kim Tae lay awake thinking. He had assumed all the aliens were the same, perfectly organized, completely loyal, following orders without question. But what if they weren't? What if they had the same kinds of workplace politics and disagreements that humans had? The next morning, when a maintenance worker came to fix his food dispenser, Kim Tae was ready. "The princess visits me a lot," he said casually in broken alien language. The worker froze, his long fingers stopping in the middle of adjusting a component. "More than other subjects," Kim Tae continued. "Much more." The alien glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. Not normal," he whispered in heavily accented Korean. "Previous humans, they had normal research schedule, standard protocols. But Princess, she comes here 4-5 times per day. She brings extra equipment. She stays for hours." The maintenance worker's blue eyes grew wider. "Hours?" "Yesterday. She was here for 6 hours, just watching me fix things, taking personal notes, not sharing with research team." This was only partially true, but Kim Tae could see it was having the effect he wanted. The alien's calm demeanor was cracking. Not proper protocol," the worker muttered. "I think she's not following orders from her superiors," Kim Tae said, playing his biggest gamble. "I think she's doing her own private research." The maintenance worker finished his repair in record time and hurried out of the room. But Kim Tae could see him talking urgently to other crew members in the hallway. Over the next few days, Kim Tae planted similar seeds of doubt with every alien who entered his cell. To the food service worker, he mentioned how the princess had asked him personal questions that seemed unrelated to the official research. To the cleaning crew, he wondered aloud why his cell had so many more monitoring devices than standard protocol required. Each conversation was carefully crafted to make the aliens think that Princess Velnara was going beyond her authority. And, because these aliens lived in such a rigid, rule-based society, the idea of someone breaking protocol was deeply disturbing to them. The real breakthrough came when Kim Tae overheard two scientists arguing in the hallway. "Research parameters have been exceeded," one said in their musical language. "Princess ignores data collection schedules," replied the other. "Command structure questions her methods. But she is royalty. We cannot question royalty. But mission. Success requires following protocol." Kim Tae realized he had found their weakness. These aliens were trapped between their loyalty to hierarchy and their devotion to following rules. When those two things conflicted, they didn't know what to do. Using the communication device he had secretly modified, Kim Tae sent another message to his friends. "They're starting to doubt their princess. Keep acting unpredictable. Make them think she's losing control of the situation." Park Jin, Lee So, and Choi Han stepped up their chaotic behavior. Park Jin started requesting meetings with senior research staff to discuss his cooperation with the study. Lee So began asking detailed questions about alien research protocols. Choi Han demanded to speak with someone higher in command than the princess. All of this was completely outside normal procedure. Human subjects were supposed to be passive. They weren't supposed to make demands or ask questions about command structure. The crew didn't know how to handle it. Some thought they should report the humans' behavior to their superiors. Others worried that reporting problems might reflect badly on their own performance. A few began to wonder if Princess Velnara's unconventional research methods were causing the subjects to behave abnormally. While the aliens spent hours in meetings trying to decide what proper protocol required them to do, Kim Tae and his friends were preparing for something much more direct. Kim Tae had been studying the ship's systems for weeks, learning how everything worked by fixing broken equipment. He knew which corridors had the fewest cameras, which systems were most vulnerable to sabotage, and most importantly, where they kept the escape pods. The aliens' obsession with following proper procedures was about to become their downfall, because, while they debated and analyzed and waited for official guidance, the humans were ready to do something that no amount of protocol could predict. They were ready to improvise their way to freedom. The chaos Kim Tae had created among the alien crew reached its breaking point on a Tuesday, or at least what felt like Tuesday in the endless cycle of artificial days aboard the ship. 3 different groups of aliens were holding meetings about protocol violations and research irregularities, while Princess Velnara was locked in heated discussions with her superiors via holographic communication. Kim Tae knew this was his chance. Using a small piece of metal he had secretly kept from one of the broken machines, Kim Tae had been slowly working on the wall panel that controlled his cell's environmental systems. It had taken him 2 weeks of careful work during the night hours, when surveillance was minimal, but he had finally created a gap large enough to access the ship's internal wiring. The aliens' technology was incredibly advanced, but like everything else about their civilization, it followed rigid patterns. Kim Tae had learned those patterns by watching repair crews work. Every system had backup protocols, every backup had a manual override, and every override could be accessed if you knew where to look. He didn't have proper tools, so he used what he had. A torn piece of fabric became insulation. His shoelaces became wire ties. The metal spring from his mattress became a conductor. It was crude and ugly and completely against every engineering principle the aliens followed. But it worked. Kim Tae sent power surges through the ship's communication network. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to trigger emergency lockdown procedures in multiple sections. As alarms began blaring throughout the ship, he activated the modified device he had hidden weeks ago. The message went out simultaneously to Park Jin, Lee So, and Choi Han. "Now, emergency. Follow the escape route we discussed. What the aliens add." didn't understand was that while they had been studying the humans had been studying the ship. During their chaotic behavioral performances, they had been mapping corridors, timing guard rotations, and identifying security weaknesses. Park Jin was the first to act. When his cell door automatically unlocked during the emergency protocol, he didn't head toward the obvious escape routes. Instead, he went to the maintenance tunnels Kim Tae had told him about, narrow passages that the tall aliens couldn't easily navigate. Lee so used her medical knowledge to create a distraction. She triggered the ship's biological contamination alarms by mixing cleaning chemicals in ways that produced harmless but alarming-looking smoke. The aliens' perfect health protocols forced them to evacuate entire sections of the ship. Choi Han, despite being the youngest, had the most dangerous job. He had to reach the ship's main computer core and upload a virus that Kim Tae had designed using their own technology against them. The virus wasn't meant to destroy anything. It was meant to confuse the navigation systems by giving them conflicting information about their location. While the aliens followed their emergency procedures step by step, consulting protocols and waiting for authorization to deviate from standard responses, the humans moved through the ship, like water flowing around obstacles. Kim Tae made his way to the detention area where other human prisoners were being held. The alien guards were too busy dealing with multiple system failures to properly monitor the cells. Using the same crude techniques that had gotten him out of his own prison, Kim Tae freed 17 other humans who had been captured from various parts of Earth. "Who are you?" asked a woman who spoke with a British accent. "Someone who's getting us all home," Kim Tae replied. "Can you follow orders and move fast? After 6 months in this place, I can do anything." The group moved through the ship's lower levels, avoiding the main corridors where aliens were rushing back and forth trying to manage the crisis. Kim Tae led them toward the escape pod bay, but their path was blocked by a security checkpoint that hadn't been affected by the system failures. This was where human adaptability proved its worth. While aliens would have tried to override the security system or waited for proper authorization, the humans found a completely different solution. Lee so noticed that the checkpoint scanners were designed to detect alien biosignatures, but the vents above the checkpoint were just large enough for humans to crawl through. Within minutes, the entire group had bypassed millions of credits worth of security technology by using a route that had never occurred to the designers. They were almost to the escape pods when Princess Velnara found them. She stood in the corridor ahead, flanked by 6 guards, her robes flowing around her like liquid starlight. But her perfect composure was cracked. Her pale skin showed stress marks Kim Tae had never seen before, and her blue eyes blazed with something that looked almost like panic. "Stop!" she commanded, her musical voice echoing off the metal walls. Kim Tae stepped forward, putting himself between her and the other humans. "We're leaving. Impossible. You are specimens. You belong to the research project. We belong to ourselves." Velnara's composure cracked further. How? How did inferior beings outmaneuver our systems? Our technology is perfect. Our protocols are flawless. Our predictions should have accounted for every possible action you could take. Kim Tae looked at her, this perfect, beautiful, terrible creature who had treated him like a lab rat for months. When he spoke, his voice was steady and calm. "That's exactly why we won. You've made yourselves so perfect that you forgot how to deal with imperfection. Every system you build has to work exactly right, so you never learned how to make things work when they go wrong. But we are advanced, we are evolved, You are weak," Kim Tae interrupted. "Struggle makes you strong. Pain teaches you to adapt. Failure forces you to find new solutions. You eliminated all of those things from your lives, so you eliminated your ability to grow." He gestured to the chaos around them. Alarms blaring, systems failing, aliens running in confusion while following outdated protocols. "We're not beating you because we're smarter. We're beating you because we're used to things going wrong. And when everything goes wrong, humans don't give up. We get creative." Behind him, Choi Han's virus finally reached the navigation core. The ship's lights flickered as the computer systems tried to figure out where they were supposed to be in space. "We adapt," Kim Tae continued. "And that's something you can't study or copy or understand, because it comes from being imperfect." It comes from being beautifully, chaotically, necessarily broken. The escape pods were just 50 meters away, and Princess Velnara, for all her perfection, had no idea how to stop them. Princess Velnara stood frozen in the corridor as Kim Tae and the other humans pushed past her guards toward the escape pods. Her perfect world was crumbling around her, and for the first time in her long life, she didn't know what to do about it. The guards moved to stop them, but Kim Tae had one final surprise. As they reached for their weapons, every light on the ship went out at once. Choi Han's virus had finally reached the main power grid, and the backup systems were cycling through conflicting restart procedures. In the darkness, the humans moved, by feel and instinct, while the aliens fumbled for their emergency protocols. By the time the lights came back on 30 seconds later, Kim Tae and his group were already sealing themselves into the escape pods. "Wait!" Velnara called out, running toward them. But Kim Tae was already activating the launch sequence using the same crude improvisation techniques that had gotten them this far. The escape pods shot away from the alien ship like bullets, their simple navigation systems pointing them toward the nearest inhabited system. Behind them, the massive vessel drifted helplessly as its computers tried to resolve the contradictory location data that Choi Han had fed into their navigation core. Kim Tae watched through the small porthole as the ship became a distant star, then disappeared entirely. After months of captivity, the sight of open space felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. "Are we really free?" asked Park Jin, strapped into the seat beside him. "We're really free," Kim Tae replied. The journey back to Earth took 6 weeks in the primitive escape pods. They survived on emergency rations and recycled water, but nobody complained. After the psychological torture of being watched and studied every moment, even the cramped discomfort of the pods felt like luxury. When they finally reached Earth's solar system, Kim Tae felt something he hadn't expected. He wasn't just relieved. To be home, he was proud. Not proud of himself specifically, but proud of humanity. They had faced something impossible and found a way through it using nothing but determination and creativity. The authorities debriefed them for weeks, documenting everything about the alien technology and their captivity. Scientists wanted to study their experiences, psychologists wanted to treat their trauma, and military officials wanted to prepare Earth's defenses. But Kim Tae found himself thinking less about the aliens and more about what he had learned about his own species. He returned to his small repair shop in Seoul, but everything felt different now. The mice that lived in the walls didn't bother him anymore. They were just creatures trying to survive like he had been. The leaky roof during rainstorms reminded him that imperfection could be beautiful, that struggling against problems was what made you stronger. Customers brought him broken motorcycles and appliances just like before. But now when he fixed them, he understood something deeper about what he was doing. Every repair was an act of adaptation. Every solution he improvised was proof that humans could take something broken and make it work again. Park Jin went back to teaching, but his lessons were different now. He told his students that making mistakes wasn't failure. It was practice for dealing with the unexpected. Lee So returned to her hospital job with a new appreciation for the messy, imperfect, wonderfully chaotic nature of human bodies that somehow kept working despite everything that went wrong with them. Choi Han never did take his college entrance exam. Instead, he started a technology company focused on adaptive systems, computers that could function even when parts of them failed, just like humans did. Sometimes Kim Tae wondered what had happened to Princess Velnara and her perfect civilization. Were they still drifting in space, waiting for someone to send them proper repair protocols? Had they learned anything from their encounter with chaotic humanity? He hoped they had, but he suspected they hadn't. Perfection was a prison that most people couldn't escape from, because escaping required admitting that perfection wasn't actually perfect. 6 months after his return, Kim Tae was working late in his shop when the radio news mentioned something interesting. Astronomers had detected strange signals from deep space, not the organized mathematical patterns that scientists expected from alien civilizations, but chaotic, creative, improvised transmissions that seemed to change and adapt constantly. Kim Tae smiled as he hammered a dented exhaust pipe back into shape. Somewhere out there, other humans were probably getting abducted by aliens who thought they were studying primitive specimens, and those humans were probably teaching their captors the same lesson Kim Tae had taught Velnara, that trauma doesn't break humans, it makes them stronger. That imperfection isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. And that in a universe full of perfect, stagnant civilizations, the messy, chaotic, beautifully broken species called humanity would always find a way to adapt, survive, and thrive. The aliens had wanted to study human resilience. Instead, they had proven that resilience was exactly what made humans unstoppable. Kim Tae turned up the radio and kept working, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of his imperfect little shop, knowing that somewhere in the vast universe, humanity was spreading its beautiful disorder to every corner of the galaxy. And that was exactly as it should be.